A few weeks ago on this show, we addressed Alternative Canada, where we saw people rising up from coast to coast across this country in order to take full advantage of the country's resources and work together to get around the problems we're seeing in today's economy in Canada and to get around relying on the government to come and help us out. Today, we have a special guest joining us for a very important interview. There's actually an organization that does this and is trying to start this movement across this country. I'm really excited for today. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things. I'm Chris Baker. This is going to be an excellent episode. Stick with it. We've got Dr. Jeff Wilson, who is president of Novometrix Research Incorporated, who is actually starting work on a lot of the Alternative Canada movement that we talked about just a couple of weeks ago. And Jeff has a number of things he can share with us about what the organization is doing and how you can get involved. I had the chance to sit down with Jeff recently, and here's that interview now. All right, welcome back. I'm sitting here with Dr. Jeff Wilson, who's president of Novometrix Research Incorporated. Jeff, welcome. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
And thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. And just before we get into the crux of Alternative Canada, and this is where we know you kind of got the interest in talking about this further. And then when you and I had a chat, it became really, really interesting. This is something that I think Canadians across the nation, coast to coast, really, really need to take seriously and think about as we move forward as a nation. But before we do that, let's give our audience a little bit of your background so they know where you're coming from on this, and then we'll get into our main questions.
Sure. Yeah. No. No. Thanks very much. So yeah. By training, I'm a veterinarian originally. I graduated from the vet school in Guelph in '82. Did a couple of years of practice. Realized I wasn't really a practitioner. Went back and I did a doctorate in pathology. Then I did a doctorate in epidemiology. Became a professor at the University of Guelph in population health. Cross appointed to the Public Health Agency of Canada, and ended up doing a lot of outbreak response, heavily involved in Walkerton, for example, a bunch of epidemiologic research. And I started our company, Novometrix Research, in the early 90s. I was a professor. You're allowed to do some consulting. So I started that, and I was just curious as to how it would work. And then just grew that up over the last 30 years or so. We started as a technical, like a data analytics company for animal health, human health, this kind of stuff. And then, but in the last 10 years or so, we kind of pivoted to be working on bringing together what are called distributed networks. So government, business, academia, not-for-profits, and the public to solve so-called wicked problems. So those problems that are hard to solve because many people have to be involved. They're not linear, that sort of thing. So that's pretty much who I am and what we do.
Okay, so that's an interesting background to switch from animals to working with people and trying to get people kind of
Totally.
and guide
Well,
themselves.
we are animals.
That's
We
true.
are animal. And the one thing about a veterinary degree, it is an excellent degree. So people don't realize you get a lot of training, you get a lot of basic medicine, epidemiology, and a lot of really good problem solving. It's actually a lot broader than a medical degree generally, because a vet has to do a whole bunch of stuff themselves, kind of thing. So anyway, that's sort of why this happened this way, I guess.
No, that's interesting. So we obviously during this conversation you and I had previously to this interview, we talked about community network integration. This was the big idea that
Hmm.
organization have, and really it's something we want to expand on today because it talks very much about what we were talking about in the Alternative Canada episode. So for our viewers right now, can you sort of describe what CNI is, community network integration, and how you think this is going to help,
Hmm.
especially with the way that it feels like government's really gridlocked right now, and it kind of seems like it should be up to us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I I kind of ramble a bit. It's mainly I've just found it helps to kind of tell the story a bit of how these things happened so people can understand it. Because a lot of these ideas are non-linear, right? You have to kind of wander around a little bit to understand what's happening. So um, what I found in my travels was, and as we started getting involved in wicked problems, we started to realize that society now is incredibly siloed. So government really doesn't talk to business, really doesn't talk to people. They kind of talk at people. Government doesn't talk to itself. And with that, you simply can't solve these complex problems by not coming together and talking. And it's got to the point where people actually don't know how to talk. Like government doesn't really know what the public wants, right? They don't talk to them. They talk just enough to give the impression that they talk, but not actually to solve, to come up with solutions. So with that, over the years, I tried to figure out how can we start bringing people together. And I'd been quite collaborative in my university and government stuff and my business stuff. I had some good mentors who showed me that, and I saw the power of collaboration. And so CNI simply recognizes this mass siloing of all these networks. So I live outside of the city of Guelph. City of, the corporation of the city of Guelph, it has a business process, but if you look at all the people involved in the city and the community, there's no process to bring them together. So what emerged over time was this thing we call CNI, which helps to bring these networks together. And it basically has two parts to it. One is we look at the network that we're interested in, which might be a community, it might be a business network across the country or whatever. And we recognize that the reason they don't communicate and don't actually function very well, the reason why communities don't function well is because they don't have a business process. Or that's certainly one way of describing it. So they don't know what their vision is. They don't have an HR process. They don't even know who is in the community really. They have no way to come up with good ideas around projects or service or whatever. And as a result, it's our communities kind of function like really dysfunctional companies or other organizations where there's no one really in charge and a lot is being left on the table. So what CNI does is it has the one part is the business process to bring people together and actually getting them functioning like a well-oiled machine. And the other part is social psychology. So in order to bring people together, it's obviously it's like herding cats. And you need some pretty heavy duty understanding of how to bring people together, especially in a lot of these networks where some people really don't want to collaborate with other people. And you have to have ways to stepwise bring them together. And that's what CNI does. And there's a bit of science behind it. And then we didn't just do the science and publish it. We actually took it into the real world and tested it. So we have all the scars and bruises to prove that we've been learning how to actually do this, if that helps.
Yeah, it does. And you know what's interesting about that is the get it done attitude of CNI, right? Just what I'm hearing there and I'm sure it comes because of the research and the te community testing, but it really does feel like it has a get it done sort of focus to it, which I think is mainly when we look at the viewer questions later, you're going to see that's kind of really what they're focused on too, is how do we get out there? How do we actually do this? And we'll get to that in a second. But the episode itself
Sure.
couple of things. Grain ops, for one, BC forests stewards, and rural school boards striking out on their own. The question I
Right.
is how does CNI community network integration sort of capture that, and how does it capture it through the get it done spirit of CNI?
Totally. So one way of answering that, I guess, is so as we were creating Novometrix, and CNI is a spin-off of Novometrix, right? We basically developed it because Novometrix itself is a network company. We don't have any employees. We function as a network. So in developing Novometrix and working in the government and at the university and so on, I started to really, I think, appreciate how important culture is to any organization. Um, so now what is culture? Well, it's one of those things kind of who knows really, but it broadly it's the way people interact with each other, right? And so one thing, so yeah, you can have the most brilliant technology in the world, but if people are fighting with each other, you will fail as an organization, right? So you actually have to focus on culture. And what we did in Novometrix, and this kind of just emerged. It wasn't sort of a master plan from the beginning. It kind of emerged, right? And from reading a lot and talking to people and looking at other cultures and whatnot, we realized from the beginning, you got to focus on culture. And what we started to conclude was that you should focus on a culture of what we call high emotional energy. So it's not original. It's just focus on emotional states like collaboration, gratitude, working together, being transparent, setting boundaries, right? That kind of stuff. So we focused on that, and what we found was that it really worked. So with CNI, we baked that into it right from the beginning, and so it's written into the business model. We have a culture of high emotional energy, and people will say, "So what does that mean?" And then we explain it, and then we say, "Well," and then we have a set of values which are parallel with that. We just started to name them, and the more we named them, the more we ourselves had to live up to them, and the more we attracted people who embodied those values, and people that didn't embody them, they kind of tend to disappear. So we just then in our community projects, because I think because we live that, it's not meant to be arrogant. It's just it's more practical. Like we just figured you got to do this, especially when you're bringing together groups who are not used to working to each other. So I think that's probably we just built it in as part of our culture, collaboration and a can-do attitude. So there's different ways you can call it. We say, well, we focus on solutions. We focus on possibility thinking, and it's kind of baked into everything we do. It's baked into my personality now. That's why I have this kind of over the top, excited about everything personality, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense, and it's interesting too. Like when you look at the comments in the first video, and there's lots of them in there, but a lot of the comments just spoke to what you were speaking about just there, where they were saying, this seems all great and it's a great idea, but what about the groups that have never worked together, the groups that
Yeah,
trouble sort of integrating with each other? And I think that leads into our next question beautifully because. Really, if I'm a listener, I'm a watcher of this video right now, and I'm interested in this, maybe I'm doing some sort of housing project, or I'm in mental health, or I'm doing something else in food or whatever. How do I get started with something like CNI? What would be my first steps?
yeah. So it's yeah, so I'll take a stab at that, and it won't be necessarily the right answer for everybody who's listening, right? And that's part of CNI. It's a nonlinear process. So it's not like baking a cake, like two eggs due to mix. I say it's more like deciding what do we want to have for dinner tonight, and then making it, right? It's nonlinear. So typically I'd go if people are asking that question, so if a listener is asking that question, how do I get started? Almost for sure, they already are at the place where they go, I kind of think I want to get started on something, right? By definition. I ended up writing a book on belief systems. So this actually helped a lot in understanding how people think and how I think, right? And mapping that. So that's almost certainly the case. So I'd go, well, what is it you want to do? It turns out that's a really important question. And often what we'll do is we'll go fairly deep because people in this society, it's very unusual for people to actually sit and say, what is it I actually want to do in my life? Right? People are more like, I got to take out the garbage, or I have to, take care of the kids, or I have to get a job. it's rarely that they get to the point of what do I actually want to do? When you do that, and it can be quite a dramatic process, and I'm pretty used to taking people through that process. I took myself through it, and it was quite transformative. And so I know if you get to the point of thinking, what do I want to do? You start tapping in, by definition, in your brain, you're starting to tap into what is my passion, which many people have never thought about. I know you've already thought about that, or you wouldn't be doing what you do for a living,
That's true.
right? You're doing what you want to do. Yeah. And so what I'd say as a starting point is, what is it that you'd want, that you would like to do? And then I go, okay, now that you're thinking about what you'd like to do, what would you like to do that would be so amazing it would keep you up at night, right? And when you get to that place emotionally, it takes you up to a very high emotional state, right? And as you get there, you'll come up with ideas about what you want to do. So it may sound like weird, like no, 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 Jeff, I need to know how do I market this? How do I do? And I go, well, I would always start with what it is you want to do, because almost certainly there's ways that you can find out what you want to do more and become more passionate. And as you do that, you'll start taking the steps that will allow you to make it a reality, which we can talk about in a sec. But I would say that's the absolute number one, if that's helpful.
Absolutely. That's great. And that is great information. I want to get our next question right. So I apologize to you and to our viewers for having to read this one, but you do have a specific phrase for something that I think is very important to get right. So the question we had written down that you and I agreed upon was, some folks worry that decentralized movements can spin out of control without standards. And you combine CNI with something that you call the Universal Quality Management System, or UQMS. See, I knew I was going to mess it up regardless.
Totally.
Was that how do you keep projects accountable and effective without turning into sort of more red tape, which we know we experience with our government today?
Totally. So I would say the first step in this is actually seeing that you want to, it comes down to the two things, that you want to start building a business plan for your project. So say somebody wants to, um, trying to think, I got, one of the things we've done in Guelph, Wellington is we've worked a lot on homelessness, right? So as you start, if you wanted to do that or anything else, start thinking about what is the business process for that. So you want to start thinking, and I'm happy to share stuff on this. It's not original. It's just stuff I learned from reading and about, like I kind of took myself through an MBA by reading the textbooks, right? This kind of stuff. So you start with that, and that will automatically start. If you start looking at things like mission, vision, and values, by definition, you're going to be and leadership. That's part of the business model. If you start reading leadership stuff, and I would recommend to people pick up a YouTube video or whatever on leadership. If you do that, you're going to start to see, I get it. To make this work, we have to have good leadership, and one of the things is accountability. And then you kind of go, well, what does accountability actually mean? Because people don't normally think about what it means, right? So if people start to just look at that business process idea and kind of reflect on it, right? And then start talking to a few friends about it, people you trust, that you feel, hey, I have this idea I'd like to do. Talk to a friend who you think will get it, not somebody who you think will be a critic, but who'll say, no, but can provide you input. If you do that, you're going to start to realize that accountability has to be built into it, and you'll start building in accountability. So you'll do stuff like, well, we're going to make a vision, right? We're going to make a vision of the project. So if you want to work on homelessness, well, you're going to have a vision for what it is your group wants to do. Once you write that down and start showing it to people, that creates accountability. That that is one reason, one among many reasons why government at virtually every level in Canada is completely off the rails, because there is no vision. There is like a quasi vision, right? And I will, it's like a political platform. I will stop inflation. Okay. How are you going to do that actually, right? And how much are you going to stop it? And let's write it down so that every month we can publicly review it and hold you to account. That never happens. And as a result, it's pretty much utter chaos. That's normally what government is. So is that kind of helpful in terms of building the accountability? And then the UQMS, all it does, it takes it to another level by formalizing it. So if you where it comes from, for people who work in things like auto manufacturing, that's where QMS started. Over the years, big companies especially have developed very robust systems for making sure that all the different things are actually happening and the accountabilities are happening. We just took that idea and started applying it to distributed networks, which I don't think it's ever been applied to. I don't think a city has ever put their stuff on. They've claimed to put it under QMS. I've seen it. I've seen stuff where Toronto Public Health has claimed to put it under QMS, but if you look at their system, it's not a quality management system. It isn't. It's part of one, right? And often what happens is those become public relations and marketing vehicles. I'm not saying it's true of Toronto Public Health, just saying it officially. But many of these organizations and government bodies begin using those ideas as marketing or public relations vehicles to make people think that they have a quality management system when they don't. So it's a matter of getting people thinking about this actually. The details actually matter. Is that helpful?
Absolutely, that's huge. The details absolutely matter. I think one of the details
Yeah.
that I think people are missing right now because they're so frustrated. I mean, I know you're a watcher of this show on other episodes as well. You've seen my frustrations shared across many episodes.
Yes. Yes.
I think our big message here, before we get to the viewer questions, I think what we want to do is we want to really focus on how to turn that frustration that we see across the country. And it's I mean, we're seeing it especially in the West right now, obviously with separation talk and things like that, but we see it across Canada. How do we turn that into measurable progress? And what do you see as the biggest opportunities right now in Canada to start integrating something like CNI into society so that we can start to take things on into our own hands and move that frustration into opportunity.
So there's a couple of things there, and so I'll start with the first one. If I forget the second one, you can remind me. Okay, I think the first one is sort of in terms of the frustration piece, like how do we manage our own frustration? Okay. And the next one is, okay, how do we then take that and do stuff that's more effective, right? The way I handled is to look at both sides. So I totally get why people are frustrated. I also get frustrated. But what I've found is if I focus part of my time on being less frustrated, that's really helpful. It speaks to this thing of managing your emotional state, right? So if you're in a state of frustration, it's very hard to see what is the next smart thing to do. It's like if you study the neurology, there's actually neurological. Like if you're frustrated and angry and whatever, it's very hard to see the obvious next step. So, and you can't see it. So for individuals to begin managing our own frustration, that's actually really important. And so what I do is, and I've tried a bunch of different things. I started out years ago doing things like cognitive therapy on myself because I realized bit by bit that this works. And it's the basis of things like management consulting, right? If you go to a high-end management consultant, they'll tell you, yes, they'll sit you down, they'll say, this week I want you to get up in the morning and first of all meditate for 5 minutes. Okay. It turns out that actually works really well. And people may say, "Oh, that's crazy." And I go, no, it's not crazy. In fact, nowadays I think more and more people are realizing, no, this kind of stuff actually makes sense. So
Absolutely.
a bit of meditation in the morning, and then another one is cognitive therapy of the form of just sitting down in the morning and going, everything actually feeling the feeling of everything being okay, feeling the feeling that of gratitude. Hey, things are not perfect, but we do live in an amazing country, and I am lucky to be alive, and I'm lucky, my family and everything. That, it turns out, sets you up for the next step, which is what to do next. What to do next. So I know part of the thing was the frustration, and then the rest of the question was about what to do. Was that it? What people
Yeah, to turn it into opportunity.
turning out opportunity. So I'd go, and that kind of flips back to what we were talking a moment ago. So I'd go, okay, now that you're feeling somewhere between okay and pretty darn good about life in general, you're in a position. So you've thought about what you actually want to do, right? Well, typically people will go, yeah, I want to make some more money, have more free time, contribute to my community and society, and just enjoy my life, right? So then I'd go, okay, now what makes sense? Starting with where you are with what you have, that's actually really useful. It was, I forget who said that. It was some president, right? Start with where FDR or somebody. Start where you are with what you have. So I'd go, a lot of this is an exercise in the unbelievably obvious, actually. So then I go, okay, well, what do you want to do? What feels right next? A lot of it is feeling intuitively. Well, for me, as I was doing this, and I'd done a bunch of CNI type projects, like in honeybee health and COVID and whatnot. And then I kind of went, oh, I wonder if I could do this for my community. See, I never would have got to that place unless I'd been focusing a bit on what I want and actually feeling good. Because if I was feeling depressed, the last thing I'd be thinking about is how can I help my community? I'd be thinking, how can I hang on by my fingernails, right?
Exactly.
So with that, I simply I spent a lot of time downtown. I live outside of the city of Guelph. We have a little farm, but I spent a lot of time at this little coffee shop downtown. And I got this idea. Well, maybe I wonder. I was just developing this CNI idea, and I thought, I wonder if I could bring together all of Guelph Wellington, right, for fixing problems. Well, at some level, it's an insane idea, right? But it's insane in that it's actually a really smart idea. It's only insane because almost no one thinks about such things, not even politicians who it's really their job. And so I went, well, who should I talk to? So I went, I know, how about my member of parliament? Now, most people would not think of such a thing, right? I happen to know him, and he said, yeah, let's go out for a beer at the Woolly. It's like a pub downtown. And so we ended up talking about stuff. He said, Jeff, this is a really good idea, bringing the community together. And he started talking about stories of when he had done the exact same thing. I I noticed that he had done it once or twice, but he didn't continue it as a pattern. And I went, I'm going to continue it as a pattern because that's part of what he's doing. He's got a success strategy, but he only did it once or twice. So with all that, then I started asking people, what's the biggest problem in Guelph? And everybody said homelessness, right? So I went, okay. I knew that a good idea is to start with a problem that a lot of people think is a problem. Because then you'll be able to engage a lot of people. They won't all agree on what causes the problem or the solution, but they'll come to the table if you do it right. So I started I just started talking to people in the community. The first one was the local mission that was feeding the homeless. I'd never been in a mission. I'd never talked to a homeless person. You see, this is the can do kind of thing. When you get your emotional state up like this, doing the obvious becomes more obvious. So I met with this guy at the mission, the pastor, and I said, has anyone tried to bring together all the players? Because there was a whole, the business people wanted the homeless people kicked out of downtown. The more left-wing people said, no, we have to be more, have more compassion, right? And this kind of stuff. So I said, well, has anybody brought them together? And he said, no. So I said, who do you think I should talk to next? Well, I just went person to person, and I ended up talking to a whole bunch of downtown businesses. I talked to all the politicians in Guelph, and a bunch of the health providers, and almost all of them would talk to me. A couple wouldn't, but almost all of them would. And they said, Jeff, I think what you're doing is a really good idea. No one's talking to each other. So then I created a community leadership team about homelessness. And then I started talking to people who could sponsor it. Well, Royal Bank, I went to my bank manager and they said, yeah, yeah, there's some community grants we can get, we're actually interested in this. So that's what I did. And I'd kind of go for somebody else, I go, something like that. Something like that is what's going to happen. You'll find the path. But what I was spontaneously doing was building out a business process, the mission, the vision, the values, the human resources, the projects, the funding. Then we started building a little bit of an IT framework for it. We're actually building a business model, not necessarily like a, what do you call it? It doesn't have to be business.
Right.
I just use that because generally the best information on how to run an organization is in the business world, right? So we just started doing that. And then we started more consciously applying a business process to it, including our quality management system. And then we had people across the country saying, hey, can we be part of this as well? A lot of them were my relatives. So that I'm not sure there is a step. It's not like baking a cake. Step one, one egg. Step two, it's more like, what do you want to eat tonight?
Yeah.
Ask a friend, invite them over. Hopefully that's helpful and you can edit out what is too much, but that's actually kind of how it works, Chris, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. I don't think it would need any editing. I think people understand now that it's really about a community focus. I mean, what you just did was the top problem in your community was the one you attacked first. I think that's probably where most people would want to go with this. And thought those were fantastic points on that. Now, those were our.
I was going to tell you well, there's one other thing that came out of this, just to show people how this works. So as I started doing this, I started getting onto this local, kind of like a Facebook thing. It's called Morriston Neighbors. I'm not good on Facebook and whatnot. So I thought, well, I better learn some of this. So I started watching things. I went, oh my God, people are really hurting. Like my wife and I, we're not hurting in that way, right? We're financially a lot better off than a lot of people. And so the next, about a month later, a guy got onto the thing and he said he was living in subsidized housing. His father-in-law was going to get kicked out of his subsidized housing. He's on methadone and he is a bipolar. And he said, could anyone lend me a bit of money so I can get him back into his subsidized house? So I kind of went, the way my brain works, I just go by my intuition. I went, I got to do something, right? But I can't just give him money. So we ended up lending him. We gave him a micro loan. We've done a bit of that in projects in Africa. Well, the guy, his name is Jesse, the most committed guy on the planet I could imagine. It turns out he's an amazing builder. He's a bonded carpenter and he's amazing at concrete. So he said, hey, maybe I could do stuff at your farm to pay off this loan. So I said, okay. Well, first he put up our mailbox, then he put in an entire septic system, which we needed.
Oh, wow.
Um, then we said, why don't we make our own construction company? So now we've got a construction company and we're doing very well, actually. That's where this can lead. It's more to show it's actually not rocket science in a weird way, but I just wanted, and I'm kind of going, gee, I wonder what's going to be next.
Yeah, and what I love about that is
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
yeah, no worries, and it helps. It adds the hope to it as well that they can really do anything if
Mhm.
it's to it. And that brings up the user questions, the
Yeah,
questions, because I think we posed them
sure.
and we got a few. We got a lot of good comments saying that they were just really looking forward to hearing you speak on this. But we also got a few questions, and Deborah,
Okay.
and I'm going to read it to make sure I get the user's full question. So Deborah is our first person who asks, how do we get more people on board with this type of initiative and help people understand that our government has failed us? And if we want to make change, we will just have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, so I'd go. Number one is I would focus on my own emotional energy. I really would. Do a little bit of meditation or go for a walk, walk the dog. When you're making dinner, cut the vegetables. Just don't think very much. That's meditation. Okay. Then I'd go, how do we engage people? Okay. So this comes down to more some basic stuff of social psychology. So and actually sales and marketing, right? Because it is getting more people involved is a bit of it is a sales job, right? But you're selling them on something that actually people want to have part of, right? So a good thing is don't start with the biggest critic. Don't start with people you don't know, like posting online. Do whatever you want, but generally these things statistically work better. Start with someone who you know already from your experience is likely going to be interested in this. So as you're building out the community, you don't want to, it's like sales, right? You don't broadcast to the whole thing. You go, if you're in insurance for this time, you start with your family, actually, and then you build it out. So I'd start with friends who you think might know. An individual like that, she'd know people right off the top of her mind. She'd go, yeah, my friend Karen or whatever. That would be a big part of it. And then there's uh, there's more to it than that, but I would start with that. And it's kind of like sales. Think through what would be the benefit to them. Why would they want to get involved? What would be risks? Well, a big risk might be their time. So they might go, gee, I just don't have very much time. Well, maybe we could sit down for a coffee and I can just bounce some ideas off you. Does
Yeah,
that make sense? It's really that simple.
it does make sense.
And then it's a skill set. It's like learning sales.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's people don't realize how simple it is, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
you do have to go back to how simple it might be. User
Mhm.
Grammy, who is a constant viewer of our episodes, and we appreciate her very much, does not have a name in her handle, so I apologize for that. But she, obviously a regular viewer, wants to know bartering and people with different skills helping to feed each other, things like that. She believes it will take a village. She kind of makes more of a statement here than a question, but what are your thoughts on things like that? Like bartering and getting people involved that way. Do you think that would be difficult? Or is it just as simple as just getting started?
I think, yeah, my sense is bartering is usually easier than cash once you're getting started. Um, and we actually do it all the time. So this is kind of a psychological trick, but it works, right? So I'll reframe the thing as it's actually totally easy. You do it all the time. So, with your spouse or whatever, I take out the garbage more or less every second Friday, and my wife does other stuff. We're bartering. It's not a form. We don't have like a formal agreement, but we do it all the time. And so then what we found was in Novometrix, particularly well, now as well. So we manage cash flow differently than other people. Often our things, we have money coming in, we have money going out. We don't necessarily always have exactly the money we need at a given time. So we just ask people, what do you need? We have general, if someone is going to get kicked out of their house, we make sure they get a rent payment, right? So, and we'll barter stuff. So maybe time or with Jesse with Revamp Renos, we lent him $3,000. He put in a new septic system. It was an amazingly good deal for him. It was an amazingly good deal for me financially, and we built a business out of it. We when we get sponsorships, usually we start by bartering. So although you might not think of it that way, like last year we have a community garden here to Canadian Tire and Bears and Metro, and they gave me a bunch of betting plans. And in return, we put them on our YouTube channel. It's fine. So I think it's just seeing and getting used to it, and then just doing it. Just that is actually a really good thing. A really good thing to realize is take action. Take action. Don't just think about stuff, take action. So if you and make it become a habit, not just so it's very good to get yourself in a high emotional state, and then you'll get inspired to do something, right? have a coffee or phone someone or Google something about homelessness or whatever you're interested. Realize that's really important. Taking action is really important. And then another part of the taking action thing is make it fast. Make it fast. So there's a couple of contexts in which we do that. One, we use this thing called ready, fire, aim. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I have heard of
So
it.
yeah, instead of ready, aim, 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 aim. This is how most people, right? Aim, 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 aim. Get it perfect aim. No, fire, right? And so take action is really important. And so then if you get the idea, hey, maybe I could try bartering, take some action. Do it in a, we call it doing a low risk test. So go to your kid and say, hey, if you pick up your socks right now, I'll I don't know, call you a good boy, or I'll make you a sandwich, right? And they'll actually think it's hilarious. And what happens is it starts to ingrain in your own brain, the action ingrains in your own brain more functional behaviors. So those are the kind of things I would do. I know it sounds kind of random, but these are good ideas. Take action. Take action on what action? Any action that feels like it could work.
Yeah, yeah. And that's true. I mean, sometimes it really is
Totally.
comes down to
Yeah.
simplicity, right? So, okay, last one from a
Yeah.
user, and then I want to give you the floor for a final statement on all of this. But Quirked Up Photon, that is his username, asks, does this become a venue for populism? And he fears populism can be short-sighted and fail to address deeper issues in society. What is the overall vision of the organization as it pertains to that in particular? And what do you hope to achieve down the road?
Right, right, right. Okay. So to me, populism is one of those words that I don't think anybody really knows exactly what it means. And
Right.
it can mean different things to different people. It's kind of like capitalism, right? It's like,
Yeah.
is capitalism bad or is it good? Well, I think destructive crony capitalism is not the greatest, right? But
Exactly.
in your community, like if your kid goes out and shovels driveways and gets paid, that's capitalism, and he uses it to put himself through school. That's capital. So populism to me is kind of the same thing. Now I haven't looked up the definition of it, but my sense is they also become politicized. These words become politicized. And so to me, what that means is a word that can have multiple different meanings gets taken up by either the left or the right, right? And they use it as a way to, and it happens on both. I actually am probably more left leaning, but I actually have a very strong conservative side in terms of taking action and working in the community to drive revenue because I know people need it.
Mm.
So let me think now. So they get politicized. So populism right now to me is politicized in the sense that it's a way to say it's a way to describe someone on the right wing, on the right side, that if you're more left leaning, you don't like what they're doing and you think what they're doing is destructive and scary,
Mhm.
right? Uh, it probably actually means something more general, like coming together to work together. But
Mhm.
if you say the word populism right now, for a lot of you, it's like, there's a person south of the border whose name pops into people's heads, right?
Yeah.
Immediately. So, so I kind of go, it's useful to be aware of that, the way that language is being used nowadays. It can be used for good or it can be used for lame stuff that's actually driving us apart. That's my sense. So I don't, to me, that's how I kind of think of the populism thing. I don't even know what it really means, and it means a totally opposite thing for half the population, right? So to
I think
say,
you're right.
am I populist? I'd kind of go, I don't think I am, because if I say that, some people are going to think I mean something that I don't even mean, right? That's the way. So what my vision is, I think we need to, whether we're right leaning or left leaning or in the middle or agnostic or whatever, we need to have ways to come together to work together. We need to focus on what we want and how can we do it together, right? And so my broad vision is, I think at this stage in human history, this is where the world will incredibly benefit by building ways to come together collaboratively. And I've seen it, as a professor, in government, in my own business, and just as a human being, right? In NGOs I've worked in. And so I think the broader mission for what Novometrix is doing and through CNI is to facilitate that coming together where we where we all win, where we all win.
Yeah, yeah. And what I love about
If
it is,
that's
sorry to interrupt you, but what I love
Go
about
ahead, go
it
ahead.
is
No,
that
go ahead.
it's so simple, right? And it comes down to potentially just starting in your community like you did, right? You started in the Guelph area,
Hmm.
started with homelessness. I think people look at things like this as, oh, I could never help the whole country on my own with all of this. Well, that's not what we're asking you to do, is it? It's basically
Totally,
you just start somewhere and get a group together and start somewhere, and it builds and it builds and it builds, and recommend it to friends and family
totally,
like that too. So let
totally.
let me leave this here with this last bit. I want to give you the floor, Jeff, because I think we've gotten a good understanding of what this is. I think we've got a good
Mm.
understanding of what you can do with it. What would be your final message to viewers as part of this interview who are saying, okay, I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to get started? What's your message as to maybe give them kind of a sense of what to expect?
Yeah, you mean as what they would expect themselves kind of thing, or how where things
Yeah,
are
what do
going
you
with what we're
expect to
doing, or
face?
both,
Are there
or
any things that people that you faced, I guess, that you were like,
yeah.
I didn't think that would happen, but that they might also face when they started?
Yeah, I would start with just to follow up on what we talked about, and as a lead in. Part of this is to realize the places you start yourself with what you know how to do. And then to follow up on what you're saying, pretty soon you've got to start thinking about, or you will spontaneously start thinking about things like, okay, this project can work in my community, but how could it be scaled national, for example?
Hmm.
Um, to that for that kind of thing, you need skills, you need some specialized skills that an individual person starting out with a project like homelessness or whatever it is wouldn't necessarily have, right? So you might be a nurse, right, working in a homeless shelter, and you might want to do more. Well, those skills will give you almost certainly have the skills to talk to other nurses, other friends, and that sort of thing. But you wouldn't necessarily have the skills to build a national organization. That takes a much different skill set.
Hmm.
So you want to start thinking, if that interests you, if you actually are going, I'd like now to be part of national change, then I go, yeah, you want to start thinking about that and talking to people initially in your own network who are used to doing that kind of stuff. So it might not be someone who started a national movement, but it could be someone who's your father-in-law who is the head of marketing for whatever,
Hmm.
right? So you start talking to those kind of, what you'll find is they will want to be part of your, and they'll start to bring people up. And step by step, you'll be in a position where what I want to let people know is this isn't Pollyanna. This isn't just like, oh, you can do it and just get out on a street corner and like next week you'll have a national organization. No, you'll need other skill sets. That's why it works. It's very practical. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. If there are any cynics going, yeah, that'll take you that far, but it won't take you any further. That's true. This is part. Now, your actual question was what now, Chris? It was what sorry, if you could just repeat for me what your
Sure,
question
yeah.
was.
Well, I think you actually kind of answered it, which is basically around what do people expect to face when they get this started. So it was kind of a twofold question, somebody trying to start something naturally, which I think you answered there too. But I think what we really also want to know is, we don't want people to just start and then give up because they face somebody who pushes back or a community
Oh yeah, yeah.
organization who pushes back because they already do that or whatever it is. What can they expect, and sort of how do they keep their mindset as let's go, let's get this done?
So, so yeah, so people will definitely encounter people that don't agree with their vision. You definitely will. Um, that's totally normal. And I go, it's a free country, more or less, and that's perfectly acceptable. So some people like Italian and some people like sushi, right? It's like it's totally, and
Exactly.
so it's kind of, and it speaks to the thing of emotional regulation, right? So if someone comes in and says, "Gee, I don't really like that," or if they say, "Oh, I think that's a stupid idea," or "That'll never work," what you want to do is kind of just look at that and go, "That's useful input." It helps me to sort out who the early adopters, that's likely a late adopter, right? Who's going to come in later. It makes me more resilient so I can take incoming criticism and kind of sit with it and not be totally bent out of shape and depressed. All of this stuff is like building a muscle. It's actually a lot of it's building emotional muscle, which people call resilience. And the more you do that, then what happens is people around you will say, they'll watch it, right? And they'll go, "Yeah, I saw and your husband said what you're doing is really stupid, never work." And you just said, "Okay," and walked off. And what they your friend will recognize is that's you being a leader. They'll recognize leadership, and it'll make them more interested in the whole process, and it'll grow, and their confidence in your growing leadership will make you internally need to step into that leadership role more. It's part of the psychology of this. So I would just go, yeah, you'll encounter people who don't like what you're doing or don't think it's. Keep going. Just keep going.
Right.
If they have, listen to what they say, because they might have really good input. Like that'll never work because you don't have a good way to fund it. That's actually a good idea. I just go, any ideas on how we can fund it better?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Put
Yeah,
it back on their plate.
that kind of thing. Totally.
Yeah.
I I actually I am I am a good person fundamentally, but I am devious, right? So I actually it's a good way of going, that's a good idea. You're right. Do you have any suggestions on how I could do that? Oh yeah, you could do this. Could you put that into an email to me and send it to me? So
Exactly. That's right. That's how you get some of these ideas. You're right.
that's how you can get a cynic kind of engaged, right?
For
They're
sure.
just saying what they're really saying is something like, I've spent my whole life watching things that never seem to work, and my own life just nothing ever seems to work. And so I don't believe it. But if you can throw something out to me that'll give me the slightest bit of hope, I'd be happy to do something in my own curmudgeonly way that will.
Exactly.
That's the kind of thing that happens, right? So I
Exactly.
hope that's helpful anyway.
That was very helpful, and I think this is a great spot to wrap things up, Jeff. I really appreciate you doing this and being here. This was a topic that was highly requested, and I know you were very obviously interested in it, given your background. How do
Totally.
people, if they want advice, how do they get in touch with you? You mentioned you have a YouTube channel as well. Let's make sure we push that out. And for those watching, you'll find these social handles and YouTube links in the description of this video. We'll also put it as the first comment and pin it to the top so it's easy to find. But
Yeah.
for our purposes, Jeff, how can people reach you?
So yeah, so I'm very happy to give you can give out my email address if that's appropriate for your process. You can give out my email address. I'm I'd be very interested to see who emails. Usually somebody emails me, right? And I'd be very because we have and I get a lot of people on I'm mainly on LinkedIn because I'm professor, professional, blah blah blah. And so I often get people, and some really interesting things come out of that. So I'd be very interested in talking to people, set up a Zoom call, and just see where they are and how we could. And and I'm depending on what you want to do, I'd be very interested to just follow up on that and see how, like, let's grow. I
Absolutely.
think the thing is, this is how you grow stuff, and it's like really obvious. It's like, what do you want to do? Hey, could we work together? How might that work? Hey, is there a way this could work for Chris's show?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, what
absolutely. Success
I'd be
stories are a
totally
big thing that we want to promote, especially across the country. We're already trying to do that. We do things like what the Maple, which is a segment on this show often where we talk about little businesses that have done amazing things that are growing because of it. And those are the types of stories we want to make sure we're sharing. I think in this country, in this time, in this day and age, we need to do a lot more of that. And the
yeah.
activity, just sort of push it aside every once in a while to make sure we can see these positive stories in Canada. So definitely something we want to do there. We'll
Sweet,
share your email for sure in the description and in the comment
sweet.
at the top. And for those that want to reach out to Jeff, go ahead, and Jeff will certainly be a sounding board for what you're doing in the community. I think you're very interested, Jeff, in
Totally
what
will.
other people want to do. So I think that's great. And if we can just develop more communities and grow this, I think Canada will be much further ahead down the road.
I, I, I actually can taste it. Like I can go, no, things are shifting, right? Things are actually getting better. As they get crazier, they're getting better. And I can, no, this is good. This is how we grow this. And anyway, so I'd be very happy to, if you want to reach out, whatever works or not.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Jeff, thank you
Okay.
very much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a great interview. We've got tons of great information that I know people will appreciate. I know you'll be watching the comments too to be able to answer anybody's comments that because they may ask it in the comments. So I would suggest definitely there. And if you don't, then I'll certainly forward them to you. But for those watching, if you have
Yeah,
questions,
let me know.
email him, put them in the comments, and we'll get them to Jeff. But however you want to do it, that I think is
Sweet.
important to make sure that conversation continues. So thank you very much. All right, my thanks to Dr. Jeff Wilson from Novometrix. Really appreciate his input. If you want to get in touch with Jeff, it is in the comments. It is also in the description of this video on how to do so. You can also just leave a comment with a question. I'll make sure it gets to him. But thank you for your questions and your feedback leading into this video. I really appreciate it. This is more of what we want to do with this channel going forward in this show. So please keep putting questions in the comments. Please share. It's not about necessarily growing the channel through the algorithm, all the stuff that normal people say to you about their channels. Obviously, that is what happens. It's the result of when you comment. But I would like the other result of when you comment to be leading to interviews like this, where we can grow as a community and as a country and do it together. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you again tomorrow. I'm Chris Baker, Bakes on Things for Jeff Wilson, Dr. Jeff Wilson, I should say. We'll see you tomorrow.